This is Tom Doody, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Doody in a Google search for my site. I'll be reading the words of Markus Feldenkirchen, as I've done at least 10 times now. These are collected in a playlist in my YouTube channel. I'll begin very soon with the words of Markus Feldenkirchen. I have comments at the end. Confronting the past. America finally turns its attention to rampant racism. The United States excels at dealing with injustices of other countries. They often even help other countries to cope with their shameful past. Germany will always be grateful to the U.S. for sending American troops across the Atlantic to defeat the Nazis and insisting on that Germans be held accountable for the crimes they committed. The Nuremberg trials gave Germans the opportunity to own up to what they had done. They could no longer deny it. The U.S. had been less successful, however, in conducting the same process when addressing the dark parts of its own past, including the treatment of Native Americans who were brutally repressed or even killed in order to clear the way for Western expansion. They were betrayed, neglected, disrespected. Today they live on reservations in some of the saddest living conditions in the civilized world. Americans seem even more forgetful when it comes to the history of blacks who were once snatched from their homes, forced into ship galleys, and kept like animals for centuries. Even after the end of the Civil War, the official abolition of slavery, it took another 100 years before discriminatory racial laws were finally officially lifted. To this day, the U.S. has never issued a formal apology, nor made any attempts at redress, let alone compensation. Instead, many of the institutionalized racism still exists. When a clean break from the past is not made, it may be difficult for people to part with old ways of thinking. Indeed, only do many Americans continue to hold twisted notions of the superiority of whites, but these beliefs often go unchallenged. Imagine 150 years have passed since American Civil War ended, and now, only now, has a national debate begun over whether some of the symbols of the South are inappropriate. Nine black people had to die in Charleston, executed by a white Nazi, adorned with the Confederate flag and other symbols of alleged white supremacy. It seems that there was never a thought given to the fact that the South went to war against the North partly in order to defend their right to hold blacks like animals, to put them in chains, to beat them when they were down. How is it that for many politicians, the American citizens, this flag has only now become a little embarrassing? Why are people only now asking whether it's really a good idea to name streets and public places and generals in the fight for slavery? They may have been brave soldiers, but if they were fighting for a despicable cause, they should not have monuments built in their honor, unless, of course, we believe that what they stand for is really not so reprehensible. On the Mall in Washington, and not somewhere in Germany, one can find one of the best, most poignant Holocaust museums in the world. Yet similarly impressive monuments are not dedicated to the history of slavery, racist policies throughout American history, or to the treatment of Native Americans. It's missing. Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, is enshrined on the mall at a monument fit for a deity. The fact that Jefferson was himself a brutal slave owner is something you only learn in his former estate in Monticello. Perhaps not surprisingly, this fact is not prominently displayed. To date, the Americans' treatments of its own dark past are so ignorantly passive, so intentionally vague, so in denial that it begs the question, do the majority of Americans feel any guilt or acknowledge any wrongdoing toward blacks and Native Americans? Every nation has dark spots of its own past, and nowhere are those spots darker than in Germany. However, the greatest country is reflected in how it deals with the past, whether it critically examines it in respect that United States is not the great nation it believes itself to be. And words of Markus Feldenkirchen. Beginning words of Tom Doody. Each time I reread Marcus's words, I find them equally fresh as the first time when I read his words when it was still fresh news of the killing, the murdering of 9 black people in a church. It was a Wednesday night. This was a Bible study, and this alleged white supremacist entered the church, sat down, ends up pulling out a gun and killing 9 of them, which I think was pretty close to all of them. I don't know that. I read these words. Markus was inspired by this event to write what he read, and I was inspired by Marcus's text to stand in public and read the words. It was a remarkable emotional experience for me, and I've been at it since. So my purpose is emotional calisthenics. It feels good to do this. People are critical of my country and indirectly critical of me. Okay, I hear you, Markus, and I stand out here in public, post this on the internet, and I feel better doing it. Does it change anything? I don't know, but I feel better. Now, the additional purpose on this occasion is to highlight the Syrian refugee crisis, and I'll start with Barack Obama. Now, listeners, please, if you want to find this man, his name is Jonathan Capehart. If I'm not spelling his name or giving enough detail, you can navigate to my Twitter account, go to my list, and in a relatively short list, you will find Jonathan Capehart, along with the other people that I watch fairly closely. Jonathan is an American. He is black. He is an opinion writer for the Washington Post. He is gay. He is articulate. And in this occasion, he's funny. And I go up and think he's funny. There is a speech made recently by Barack Obama in the Philippines, and it's a look at it. I get an excerpt from it. It seems weird. He's obviously in a foreign setting, and yet he's talking about domestic affairs. So, why do you go to the Philippines to talk about domestic affairs? It seems like the wrong venue. But matters at home demanded his attention, and so he made a speech, and it was highly critical of the Republican candidates for president, who are highly critical of accepting any Syrian refugees. The most quotable is the governor of my state, Chris Christie, who says he won't accept any refugees, including 9-year-old orphans, including widows. So the compassion that brought Christie's ancestors here is obviously dead with Chris Christie. So in an uncharacteristic way, Barack Obama mocks them. And so Capehart picks up from there in what I think is quite funny. So Obama, again, is articulate and he's brilliant. And Capehart is articulate, and he would probably accept, and I'm going to describe him as also very smart, but certainly not the intellectual power of Barack Obama. So he often doesn't choose language as he chooses in this text. But again, it's a fresh post. Jonathan Capehart's Twitter account, and he posts some things about Barack Obama and pulls some excerpts from the speech. And then he goes on to say, for those of you that don't understand what Barack Obama has said, here is a translation. Put it into the anger translator, Obama anger translator, and this is what you get. So again, y'all is the beginning of this. Again, this is Jonathan Capehart translating the words of the United States President, President Barack Obama, and y'all is Jonathan Capehart hypothesizing about what Barack Obama would be saying to Chris Christie and his amigos about the Syrian refugee crisis. So again, hypothetically, Capehart says Obama is really saying this. Y'all tripping about some homeless Syrian refugees, but got nothing to say about U.S. military force when asked? Come on, nah. So, the Republican candidates for president have said some ridiculous things about the Syrian refugees and this notion to accept none. Well, you know what, gentlemen and lady, there is one female making the same claim, accept none. It's a stupid idea. So here's my thoughts on the matter. My words are very close to Barack Obama. My thoughts are very close to what I assess Barack Obama, very close to what I assess Jonathan Capehart is. And that's the idea that not only should we, out of some moral obligation, but we must, out of any hope for world peace. And if you care, anyone, listeners, if you care about the next generation, you cannot deny an entire country of refugees that so desperately need it. So here's how I will articulate the same point that I think has been articulated better by Barack Obama and Jonathan Capehart, and it simply goes like this. During World War II, we interned Japanese. Now, we were at war. The United States was at war with Japan. We had Japanese people in this country, and those people got set aside. They were detained. They were put into internment camps. They were held prisoner, basically. Not because they had committed crimes, but because the United States was at war with their country. They had bombed Pearl Harbor. Ding, 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 ding. With their country. Okay. We're not at war with a country. We're not at war with a religion. We're at war with people. Terrorist cells. We're at war with the ideology of terrorism. Now, listeners, please look back to Columbine. These teenagers, Eric and Dylan, I used to be able to say their last names. After gunning down their schoolmates, they took their own guns. As I remember, they had a different gun with them that seemed to be used one time, and it was to take their own life. The idea of holding a rifle, a long gun, to blow your head off was sort of awkward. They also held a handgun that was used once and to kill themselves. Pardon me if I don't have the details right. I'm doing this by memory all the way to Columbine. So do you think, listeners, please, I'm asking you a question. Do you think Dylan and Cleveland and whatever his name was, the partner, might have subscribed to this idea of terrorism? Well, maybe. You know, for some period of time, we wanted to blame this violent act on video games and Marilyn Manson. Okay, it wasn't Marilyn and it wasn't video games. These two young men they weren't young men, they were teenagers, they were boys. They were ready to kill their classmates and kill themselves, and they did. They were ripe for IS. Certainly with the internet and a couple of IS videos, those young men could have, in a flash, been on a plane and off to Istanbul or wherever the happy place is to transfer to Syria and get yourself to Raqqa or Homs or any of these Syrian ISIS strongholds. So the idea that we can keep ourselves safe by dispositioning entire plane loads of people to say, no, Syrians, you stay home, stay out of here. We don't care where you go, but you're just not coming here. This is absolutely ridiculous. You cannot, in this war of terrorism, we cannot categorically say, you're from Syria, you're a widow. You're from Syria, you're an orphan boy. No, you are from Syria, therefore you're a potential terrorist, therefore you must stay out. No, we must, absolutely must have more, insist on more effective ways of sorting out the terrorists. Hey, they could be, I'm standing here in Hoboken Terminal. I could have some prospective terrorists here. Most of them are homeless, and they also seem, another H word, harmless. But you know what? Maybe they're not. Determining terrorists is not easy. And we must not be so stupid to think we are able to say you're from Syria, therefore you're a terrorist, stay out. Listeners, please, I'm begging, I'll do anything. Do this exercise. Get on Google Maps, zoom in on a city. I suggest you start with New York City because I know what you'll find, and then type in mosque and see how many red dots show up. All right, that's how many mosques are in New York City. I suspect some of you will be alarmed at how many of them are there. Now, of course, take it to your own city, wherever in the world that might be, see how many mosques are near you. Now, this is naive of me, and this exercise flipped my thinking. I've been to Tokyo, Japan, and for some reason I knew there would be a lot of mosques in Beijing, China, and certainly Shanghai. However, I suspected that there weren't mosques in Tokyo. Duh! There's as many mosques in Tokyo as there are mosques in Beijing, which is not quite as many mosques as there are in New York. So, listeners, do the math. You think you're going to keep terrorism out by preventing widows and orphans from Syria from entering this country? It's a foolish notion, and we must expect more of our government to keep us safe. And we can't disposition people by plane loads. You're from Syria, go away. Oh gosh, isn't this a relief we're safe? This is a bullshit notion, and Americans must stand stronger on what this country was founded on. Next topic, also fresh. There is a Muslim man in Paris who put a sign on himself, tied a scarf around his eyes, and did so in a way that he would have seen nothing. He would have had light blocked out. It would have been black. And his sign said, I'm Muslim. Are you afraid of me? Hug me. Hug me. Listeners, please imagine, please watch the video. It's easy to find. It's viral. It's double viral. Listeners, imagine yourself blacking out your vision. Now, if you're blind, this is a silly notion. You got to imagine that you're blind and you stand in public with a sign to say, you're Muslim. Do you hate me? And then you hug people. And people are one at a time, men and women hugging him. Oh, isn't this a feel-good event? Isn't it silly? No, it's not silly. Selected Muslims in a first time I've seen it have really broken the silence with this in a large sense. Believe me, Muslims had selectively in a smaller scale have done this, but Paris has been different. Not in my name is a hashtag that has carried a lot of messages. So why am I mentioning that now? Because I describe an emotional reaction to doing this. One American looks in the mirror. It's inspired me to do it at least 10 times. And it's inspired me to create a YouTube playlist And it's inspired me to keep doing it. Every time I do it, it seems fresh. Well, on this occasion, it feels even more fresh. Why? Because I imagine that Muslim man in Paris standing in public with his eyes blocked out, hugging strangers. So I'm not saying that feel-good event should touch you as it touched me. Listeners, it might be lost on you. You watch it and think it's some silly cat chasing a laser pointer. You may get no emotional reaction to it at all. However, the exercise of standing in public, as I'm doing now, again, these people here can't, the people, listeners, please, there's people in view. There's a man who just stood up. There's, I think these people over here are quasi-homeless. They might not be sleeping on the street, but I've seen them here before. They spend a lot of time in Hoboken Terminal. So, but I do too, and I have a home, so who knows? But the point is this: I am in public. These people are not my audience. The internet is my audience, but this is a simulator. This makes me feel like I'm talking to people because the bottom line is every time I've talked in public in a traditional manner, I guarantee there's people that didn't hear an effing word I said. Well, now 100% of these people are not hearing an effing word that I'm saying. But someone on the internet is listening. Listeners, you are one of them. Listener O and listener Ah, you are hearing me. These people here in front of me aren't hearing me, but it's a simulator. It makes me feel like I'm talking in public. It's highly unlikely that these people in front of me have any connection with my words, my message. But there is a greater chance that someone listening to this video is hearing what I'm saying. Please click on Jonathan Capehart, click on Twitter, click on hashtag not in my name. Find the video of the Muslim man in Paris blindfolded asking people to hug him. Listen to Barack Obama in the Philippines talking about domestic. Dress it down, Chris Christie. I couldn't be happier. Follow some conservatives on Twitter who think President Barack Obama is not an American. They're still holding on to this birther thing. Come on, we have people trying to design their own reality. The reality is we're not at war with a nation. We're not at war with widowed women coming from Syria. We're not at war with orphan children. We must sort out, find, and hunt and bring to justice terrorists. We must. And if you're foolish enough to think we can do that by closing our doors to Syrians, it's stupid. Don't be stupid. Stand for what American stands for. Listen to our president. He's making sense. He is an American. This is Hoboken Terminal. Hoboken is the home of the late legendary American entertainer, singer, quasi-political activist, Frank Sinatra. Was of my parents' generation. My parents were born in 1927 and 1928. And so Frank, I think, was born about 10 years before them. And they, like people the world over, and especially Americans of their age, just love Frank Sinatra. So here from the childhood home of Frank Sinatra, I'll guarantee Frank Sinatra's parents couldn't speak English when they came to this country. But yet this store welcomed them, this country welcomed them, and they welcomed Frank, and here we are in Hoboken. Our country still stands for something. Now is not the time to abandon it. This has been Tom Doody, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Doody in a Google search for my site. Thank you for listening. Have a good day or evening, a restful night's sleep. Ciao I didn't know, listeners. Oh no, you could see the homeless. These are the people I think are sleeping on the street. They're a little cleaner than people sleeping on the street. Uh, and I don't know who else made the view, but there's some people who were here and gone. I'll say that Jonathan Capehart translates Barack Obama. Y'all tripping about some homeless Syrian refugees, but got nothing to say about U.S. military force when asked? Come on, nah. And that's Jonathan Capehart's translation of Barack Obama from Philippines talking to the U.S. Congress, specifically Chris Christie. I know Chris Christie's not in Congress, but he's whacking at Christie, which makes me happy. Ciao.